On today's Locked On Giants podcast, Giants radio beat reporter Paul Dottino joins the show for a conversation about Big Blue as only Paulie D can bring. That's coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name's Patricia Traina. I'm your host, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI. Find my written work at si.com/NFL/Giants. And a big welcome on in to my everydayers, my Blue Crew community members, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And on today's podcast, I'm really excited to have this next guest on with me. You know him, you love him, you recognize him. He is Paul Dottino. He is part of the New York Giants broadcast team. He is also a part of the Giants WFAN radio network. And he is somebody who has been on the beat longer than I have, but he doesn't look it. So, Paul, welcome, my friend.
Hey, good to see you again, Patty.
You ready to talk some Giants?
Let's rock and roll. The season's going to be here before you know it.
All right. You know, talking Giants with Paul is a treat, folks. He gets so excited, so into it. It's like, get ready.
You got 24 hours for me?
I wish we had 24 hours. But Paul, all right, obviously, let's start off. You know, the Giants just completed the spring. You know, it was a teaching camp, obviously. Jobs weren't won, they weren't lost. But what were some of your takeaways from how the Giants approached the camp this year versus maybe last year?
Well, I think the one obvious thing that we saw is that Brian Daboll was much more calm than I remember him being during the first two spring sessions of his head coaching tenure with this team. He seemed very much into the play calling, number one, which we don't know how that's going to manifest itself during the season, but we can assume or guess that he may take those things over. But it's clear that, A, he was more methodical, he was quieter, he seemed, again, much more preoccupied with the play calling than maybe some other things that would have otherwise gotten him into a yelling mood, so to speak, because, you know, we didn't hear a lot from him when he was down on the field and we were standing on the patio in our media area to watch those sessions. I thought I also saw a lot more teaching going on with Shane Bowen, the defensive coordinator. He also is a much quieter fella than Wink Martindale was, the former defensive coordinator. He is seems to be, while more of a teacher, perhaps, and I don't want to necessarily take anything away from Wink, because certainly we understand that, you know, he had to school his guys too. It just seems like Shane Bowen is much more cerebral and methodical in his approach, because he's going to want his defense to out-scheme people. Wink Martindale wanted his defense to out-pressure people and to intimidate people. And his feeling, as he always said, was pressure breaks pipes. Well, that meant, as Bobby Okereke told us, everybody's being aggressive and playing downhill, and we're just charging at that other team's offense. Not the case with Shane Bowen. Shane Bowen wants everybody to know all the little idiosyncrasies of what's going to be going on with the scheme. So I think it's more important for him, if you're going to play his style of defense, to be much more cerebral, to be much more disguising, if you will. And I think there's a lot more intricacies to playing a defense that has to outsmart people as opposed to a defense that has to intimidate people. And I would say those are the two things that I saw that were prevalent every single time that I went to see spring practice.
When we look at this roster, this 90-man roster, how are you feeling about it? Do you feel that the Giants are okay at all the positions, or are there any areas that maybe you're a little concerned with at this point?
Well, I think this is a 90-man that features a lot of projection. And when I say that, I feel like they don't have any glaring, gaping holes that there are no answers to. Okay, that's the one thing you never want, right? If you've just got this big donut at a particular spot, especially a starting lineup spot, you know you're going to be in for a real haul during the course of the season. The Giants have guys who could project into filling a number of their donut spots. So they're not empty holes, but they are projections, which kind of means they're a gray area. If they work out, at least they've got bodies in camp who may be the projected answers. There are other teams in this league who have donut holes at certain spots and don't have guys in camp who even have a chance to project as an answer. And so when I look at this team right now, I see projections at cornerback 2. I see a projection at the running back spot behind Singletary, specifically a bruising back, a big shouldered pounding back that can get short yardage or goal line stuff. I'm sorry, I just don't see that there. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure who the 3-technique defensive tackle is going to be. We know that there are candidates. Again, there are projections. I don't think Nacho particularly had a great first season with the Giants. I thought he was okay, but he needs to be better. So does Riley take that spot? Does Phillips take that spot? I think Ryder Anderson right now, in my mind, might be the best physically fit guy for that job. But is he going to seize it after being with this team for a couple of years and not really having an opportunity to produce? So I think those are the 3 spots right now that would provide the biggest projections for me. And then if I could list one more that's kind of a little bit less, that would be the nickel spot. Because we know that they've got Darnay Holmes, who's played there before. He's been very inconsistent, but he has had some good moments there. So I think that's the other spot, because I don't know if Dre Phillips is going to be able to win that spot right out of the box. Maybe he can, but maybe he can't. Maybe Trey Herndon takes that spot right out of the box. He just signed the other day. We know he's played more slot than he has boundary, so maybe he's the guy. So you see what I mean? There are projections, and that's what I'm talking about. There's the projection at the corner because we know that they have guys. They got guys like Trey Hawkins out there who potentially, could have a better second year than he did as a rookie. We know that Cordell Flott right now is running as the starter. And I personally think that he should win the job. I'm a big Flott guy. I've always thought he should be on the boundary. But we don't know 100%. And then at the running back spot, like I said, that may be the one that's not even a projection. That's really a hole. They don't have a big bruising running back on this roster at all. And that means that the offensive line is going to have to get the push or the crease for Singletary, who, by the way, is a good runner between the tackles, but he's not the kind of guy who's going to push the pile if they've got 8 guys in the box and it's 3rd and a short 2. Singletary, when contact is made, Singletary's not pushing those guys back an extra 8 inches to get that first down. That's not his game, okay? So while he will run inside, he is not a pusher, so to speak. And that's a problem for me. I think there are too many times in short yardage, whether it's goal line or even trying to get a short first down, where the Giants are going to rue the fact that at the moment they don't have a power back who can push that pile. Brandon Jacobs is long retired, as you know.
And he was, of course, the prototype, if you will. Paul, you brought up the offensive line, and that is probably one of the number one questions I get from Giant fans. What's this offensive line going to look like? How is Evan Neal going to do? What do they do if it's not Evan Neal? Who's going to play the guards? What's your take on all that? How do you see it all sorting out?
I just think they have enough numbers. And this is something that they've done now over the last several years, and then it turns out they never have enough numbers. But if you look at it right now, I do believe that it'll be Thomas and Neal at the tackles, Illuminor and Runyon at the guards, and JMS at center. I think that will be your starting five. I do believe that. I know Neal is coming off of ankle surgery, and he was really slow during spring. I understand that. But Carmen Brasillo, the new offensive line coach, has made it clear that Neal gets the first shot at right tackle. I believe him when he says that, and I think Neal is going to get that shot. And I'm like Joe Shane. I think I've seen enough of his work at Alabama that makes me think he can still make that work. I know Runyon is a functional guard. I know Illuminor is functional at 4 places on the offensive line, so I have no question about him holding down the left guard spot. We know what Thomas is, and JMS had a rookie season. And when I say that, I mean there was some ups and there were some downs, like most rookies have. Very rarely does a rookie come right out of the box and become great. I have no reason to not believe in JMS. Okay, there was too much coming out of Minnesota when he was drafted that makes me believe he is going to be a really good one. He may not go to the Pro Bowl, but then again, he doesn't have to. He just has to be really good. And I think that in year 2, we'll see him progress. And I think he will be really good. So I suspect that if you look at that starting five, I like the projections of Azudu, McKeithen, Stinney. I guess the backup center they signed from Schlotman, the backup center they signed from the Vikings. I mean, he's a competent backup. So they've got bodies. Now it's just a matter of what can Brasillo do with them. I think Brasillo was the most valuable addition to the offensive line during the offseason. Not any of the players. It's Brasillo, who, if you look at his career, whether it was in college or in the pros, his unit has always either played to the back of their football card or overachieved. To my knowledge, when I went back and looked at his resume, I could not find, I stress this, folks, I could not find where Brasillo's offensive line unit underachieved during the course of his career. That is a great sign for an assistant coach.
For sure, for sure. I want to stay on Evan Neal for a minute because you mentioned that you've seen him perform at a decent enough level in college. College and the NFL, 2 very different levels. A lot faster, a lot defensive linemen, outside linebackers, a lot shiftier, clever. They use all kinds of tricks that maybe some of these college kids don't have. I know Evan Neal played in the SEC, which is like the closest thing to the NFL. But, that being said, I also know he's had some injuries, but what is it about his technique or his game when he's been healthy that just has kept him from being the guy that they think he could be?
Well, I think there are actually a couple things. First of all, there's no question the injuries have really set this guy back. His development has been really slowed down to a tortoise's pace because of the injuries that he had. And you and I both know, Patty, we've been around the game long enough that when a lineman has a knee or an ankle or a thigh or a quad or a shoulder or a hand or whatever it is, it totally screws up his technique. And now he's all bent out of shape, but he's all out of whack. Much like a pitcher in Major League Baseball. He's got one ache, it throws off his mechanics, and all of a sudden the guy looks like he belongs in AAA. It's no different for an offensive lineman because so much of what they do has to be technique. So that's number one. Number two, it is very clear to me that the shuffling and the juggling of all the different people that have played alongside him over the course of the first several years of his career has definitely been an impediment for him. You know, I really wish that Mark Lewinsky had worked out better for the Giants and had been steady and consistent and was able to stay in the lineup, because I think Lewinsky could have been a positive influence on Neal and helped bring him along to some degree. But the fact that Lewinsky was unable to stay on the field for whatever the reason was, performance, nicked up, for whatever the reason, him being in and out of the lineup certainly did not aid Neal's cause at all. And then the third reason in my mind that has inhibited Neal's development is the fact that him and offensive line coach Bobby Johnson just never seemed to be quite on the same page. And you and I both know when we talk about staffs of these coaches in the National Football League, man, oh man, they are so underrated. They really, really are. You know, these assistants, these positional assistants, have such an important part and such an important role on a team. And there's sometimes personality conflicts. Sometimes it's the coach's fault. Sometimes it's the player's fault. Sometimes it's just there's a teaching disconnect. For whatever the reason, Bobby Johnson did not have enough of connections to get the maximum production out of more of his linemen that were out of most of his linemen. And that's why he's not here anymore. But Brasillo's resume says that he does do that. So let's give Carmen Brasillo a chance to work with Evan Neal before people continue to try to throw dirt on that poor kid.
Yeah. All right, we're talking with Paul Dottino, who is a member of the New York Giants broadcast team. He is also part of the New York Giants WFAN radio network. We've got more coming up with Paul right after this. Hey, Giant fans. So now that we're in the dead period of the NFL calendar, I'm starting to look into going to shows, concerts, and whatnot in the area. And no matter what event that I'm looking at, I never have to worry about getting tickets thanks to Game Time. With Game Time, there are always great seats available at competitive prices. They even offer last-minute money-saving deals, and they take the guesswork out as far as fees, seat views, and other aspects that can make ticket buying a nightmare elsewhere. Game Time even offers event cancellation protection, and if you find tickets elsewhere in the same section and row for less, Game Time will give you 110% of the difference. So go on and get the event tickets that you've been wanting. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Terms apply. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, joined by Paul Dottino, part of the New York Giants broadcast team, and he is also a part of the Giants radio network at WFAN, and a guy who could talk Giants all day and, all night, actually. So always fun to have him on the show. Paul, let's continue on with the offense. Another hot topic, as I'm sure you know, Daniel Jones. You've got, I mean, I don't think I can ever remember a player. I think I'd have to go back to maybe Eli, and even Eli, I don't think it was this bad, but Daniel Jones has just absolutely polarized the fan base. You've got people saying he's never going to be better than, he was in 2022, that he's not the guy, he's this, he's that. Where do you stand on Daniel Jones?
Well, I think it's important to understand, Patty, that the nature of the beast these days makes the quarterback much more of a magnet than he's ever been before. We all know that they get too much credit and they get too much blame. That's been the case forever in this league. But today, with social media and with the salaries the way they are for that position, the magnification of that magnet is about 10 times what it was maybe 15 years ago. I don't even have to go back that far. So that's what you get. You're rarely going to get somebody who's in the middle on a player. They either kind of like him or they want to bury him. Now, I think the most important thing to realize about Daniel Jones, and I get it, I really do. People will say, well, one playoff season, that's it. That's all they've seen. There are injury issues, so durability has been another negative for him. I can't dispute that. Those are the facts. One playoff season and a bunch of missed games. Those are facts. I will never dispute the facts. I live off of facts. But there are some other facts as well. And Bob Papa did a great job, the radio voice of the Giants the other day, posted a statistical comparison. His numbers are virtually mirror image of Trevor Lawrence, who just got a huge contract to be the franchise quarterback at an extension with the Jacksonville Jaguars. There's a perception out there that Trevor Lawrence is one of the best young quarterbacks in the league and absolutely deserved this contract. But then if you ask people about Daniel Jones, well, they want to throw him off the top of the Palisades and into the Hudson River. That's just dumb. It's just dumb. And the thing that Bob pointed out was the passing stats between Lawrence and Jones are not only virtually identical, but the numbers that were presented in the chart did not include rushing totals. And of course, Daniel Jones is about 25 times the rushing threat that Trevor Lawrence is. And that's proven time and time and time again. So when you put that into the cauldron, if you will, well, the soup doesn't taste so bad, does it?
Well, I mean, depending on your perspective, but I mean, if you're going off of numbers, but the important number, obviously, wins and losses.
Never,
and then also,
never. Wins and losses is the most bogus quarterback stat in history.
Yeah, but that's what means the difference between a playoff team and a team that sits home.
No. Wins and losses determine a playoff team, but wins and losses are a team stat. They are not a quarterback stat. Absolutely, positively not. I firmly believe that is the most bogus quarterback stat that people and analytics folks love to throw in other people's faces. It is a completely bogus stat.
Okay.
Just like wins and losses are for pitchers in baseball. Starting pitchers in baseball, the one-loss record is not a true indicative stat, which we've now learned over the years that there are many others like, the whip. The ERA was always thought of as an important one. Opponent's batting average, number of quality starts. People finally understood that in baseball, the one-loss record was probably one of the most futile and least important statistics for a starting pitcher. Same thing with quarterbacks in the NFL. People just haven't smartened up to catch up on that yet.
All right, well, then let me ask you this. Last year, yes, he had injuries. Saquon was out. Darren Waller went out. Andrew Thomas went out. The offensive line was not very good. But can we agree that last year he also took a step back in his performance?
He didn't play very well. There's no question.
That is. Why?
Absolutely. Well, I think it snowballed on him. Honestly, my opinion is that it snowballed on him. When Andrew Thomas got hurt in the first game of the season, because remember now, the first drive against the Cowboys that opened the season, he was sensational, brought him right down the field. And then what happened? 3 consecutive blow-up plays in a row, capped by the blocked field goal that resulted in Andrew Thomas with a serious hamstring injury, which he then continued to try to play through but clearly made him ineffective. From that moment forward, Niagara Falls let go, and every single negative that could have happened compounded each other and just took Daniel Jones right down the tank with every one of those issues. I firmly believe, and no one will know, it's hypothetical. Okay, this is not a fact, it's a hypothetical. You asked the question. I firmly believe if Daniel Jones, when he came back and the Giants were in Las Vegas, if he does not get hurt in that game, I firmly believe that Daniel Jones is prepared to go on a better run, okay, a better run than what you saw the first month or so of the season, and the Giants would have been a little bit more relevant down the stretch.
Okay. All right. Let me ask you this. It is possible, it hasn't been announced, but it's trending towards that direction, that Brian Daboll's going to call the plays this year. If he does end up calling the plays, how does that help Daniel Jones versus having Kafka in his ear?
Oh, I don't know if it helps him nor hurts him. Particularly him as a player, I don't know that it makes any difference. What we may see is a little bit of tweaking and a little more oregano in the offense than what we've seen in the past. And maybe the idea, of course, is that there'll be more production. Well, you got to think they added some offensive linemen. They added Malik Neighbors, a potential game-breaking wide receiver. They've lost Barkley and they've lost Waller. So it seems to me the Giants will probably be a little more pass-oriented than they were in the past. Well, Brian Daboll, this is what you do, man. You're an offensive guru. You're a quarterback guru. You know, let's see, because this offense is going to have to play into his strengths, and then Daniel Jones is going to have to just execute whatever it is that's called. I think what you'll have to see is if the overall offense is able to execute and produce and get the Giants more points. I don't think the change in play callers really directly impacts Daniel Jones as a single entity.
Some people have said that Malik Neighbors can potentially save this offense, given his game-breaking speed, his catch and stuff. I mean, is that putting a little too much on the kid?
First of all, it makes no sense. If this offensive line is not functional, then it won't matter. It's really that simple, Patty.
Yeah.
The Giants' offensive line has to be functional. They don't have to be great. They just have to be functional. They were functional in 2022. And look what happened. They had some balance. They didn't have really, the wide receiver room was absolutely decimated. I know Slayton had come on, Hodgins had come on and had some hot games, but you and I both know what that wide receiver room was in 2022. But because the offensive line was functional, they had a respectable running game, and they had Daniel Jones with enough time to do what he needed to do, despite a jigsaw puzzle of an offensive weaponry in the wide receiver room and the tight end room. Well, that right there is a very strong piece of evidence as to where the responsibility really lies here. It's really the offensive line. Now, is it possible that Malik Neighbors becomes a headache player right away? The Giants don't have any headache players right now in this offense. Zero. Saquon Barkley's in Philadelphia. He was the only headache player they really had. Waller was one a few years ago, and now he's gone. He wasn't even one with the Giants. He was with Baltimore and then Las Vegas. They don't have a headache player on offense. Neighbors could become one. But to become a headache player, you have to earn that reputation. You have to earn that respect. They don't just give it to you right out of the box. So how long will it take for Neighbors to become a headache player? Because every offense needs a headache player to cause difficulties and to make defensive units think twice about what it is that they're doing on a given play. Could Neighbors become a headache player by October? I suppose he could. One of my coworkers at the Giants today said, well, could he be right out of the box? What if he catches 9 passes for like 170 yards and 2 touchdowns in week 1 against Minnesota? Does that make him a headache player? I don't think it does. I don't think one game does it. But if he has, let's say, 3 100-yard games in the first 4, well, I think by then he's a headache player. That would be really quick. That'd be great for the Giants. But I don't know. Is it reasonable to think that he could become a headache player by Halloween? Well, I hope so. But in order for him to do that, the offensive line has to be functional. We go right back to that all over again. The circle always comes back to that.
Makes sense. Absolutely. Which the offensive line last year, I think we can all agree, was
dysfunctional.
Putrid would be the word I would use. But anyway, you mentioned Waller, who is now retired. And despite the fact that he didn't have, the greatest season, I believe he had the third most receptions on the team, I think it was last year. So we know who the personnel is, but how did they replace that production? I mean, because, it was still decent enough. It wasn't, Pro Bowl level, but it was still decent enough. So how did they replace it, do you think?
Well, it seems to me that they're looking to get more balls in the hands of the wide receivers. That's where more of those targets are going to go. I mean, you'd like to think that Daniel Bellinger can rebound after what I thought was a step back in year 2 and have a really good year 3. I hope he takes a big jump forward and becomes the guy that the Giants thought he could be when he showed flashes as a rookie before he got hurt. That would be awesome. And I think he's got it in him. But to be frank, it seems to me that, most of those completions or targets, if you will, are going to wind up being spread out amongst the receivers because you got to feel that Neighbors is going to be force-fed. And it wouldn't shock me if either Singletary or even Tracy, who I think has a real good shot to be their third down back, winds up getting a bunch of passes in that part of the game. And, if they can show that they can be dynamic, especially getting yak yardage, yards after the catch, well, to be frank, I think you're going to get more yak yardage out of those backs or the receivers than you will Daniel Bellinger. And we always say that over the last many years now, the Giants aren't making enough big plays. They're not getting enough explosive plays downfield. Well, getting the ball more to Bellinger is not the answer. Getting the ball more to Slayton and Hyatt and Robinson and Neighbors and maybe those 2 backs, that's probably more of the answer there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Giants were ranked, last year in explosive plays, or it was down near the bottom.
I mean, Patty, where wasn't this offense ranked either at the bottom or near the bottom?
Yeah, it was rough. That's for sure. All right, we are talking with Paul Dottino, who is part of the Giants broadcast team, also a member of the WFAN Giants radio network. We'll be right back. We're going to talk defense and special teams with Paul right after this. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, joined by Paul Dottino, who is a member of the New York Giants broadcast team, and he is also part of the WFAN Giants radio network crew. You can catch him on pregame, postgame. Does a really great job. Comes prepared, one of the few people who really does his homework and can just blow your mind with some of the stuff he comes up with. So, Paul, let's talk about this defense. We talked about it a little bit at the start of the program, but I want to get a little deeper into it. basically Bowen is night and day compared to what Martindale ran.
Yeah.
That being said, you look at some of the additions that they made, Brian Burns being the biggest one, I think. How does Brian Burns change the complexion of that front seven for the Giants?
Well, the idea and the reason they made the deal for Burns, not only is he in the prime of his career as a young veteran who should have many more years to go, and the Giants think he's going to get better. They think he has more upside. And remind you, this is a guy who's already had double-digit sacks in a season and gone to the Pro Bowl, right? So he's already a good player, already established as a quality impact player on defense. And they think he's got more ups. Well, here's the thing. Unfortunately for Kayvon Thibodeau, Azeez Ojulari has been hurt a lot of his career. And even last year when he played, his efficiency went down. Now, that didn't help anybody. The idea is now to have a dynamic duo coming off the edge. Now, we know that Burns likes to call himself Spidey after Spider-Man. Tibbs likes to call himself the Black Panther. So you've got these two Marvel comic book heroes now coming off of the edge who are going to give a lot of headaches. They can both wind up becoming big-time headache players for the opposing offenses. What Bowen wants to do, instead of sending the kitchen sink, he just wants to line up basically, for the most part, with four guys up on the front. You're probably looking at two defensive tackles and then the two outside linebackers acting as defensive ends, whether they're down in the dirt or standing up. They've got options there on how they want to play that. I suspect that at least at the beginning, Bowen will probably not blitz a whole lot. I mean, that's been his MO in Tennessee. And I think he's going to want to give Lawrence, Thibodeau, Burns, and whoever winds up being the three-technique defensive tackle, I expect he's going to want to give those guys every opportunity to prove that they can either provide a good enough pass rush or disprove that they can provide the pass rush. I think he's going to want to give them every chance to do that over the first month or so of the season. And then, as he said the other day, I'm always open to tweaking things. Well, that's fine. That's fine. But his conventional type of defense says, for the most part, you're going to send four and see what you can do and get things done that way. So how does Burns fit into the equation? Well, to be honest, Patty, not only does it provide a dynamic duo on the edges, but Burns does play the run too. He's not just a pure pass rusher. And we already know that Thibodeau plays the run very well. So that's really good because both of those guys now can stay on the field virtually all the time, or at least as many times as they want them to, unless they have to give them a rest. So you've got three guys between Dexter Lawrence and the two edge guys who should be three down players and play the bulk of the snaps. That provides consistency. And he's durable, by the way, too. Let me not leave that out. Burns has proven to be durable. So you have consistency, you have durability, you have the fact that they're both edge guys are two-way players. This is all good. You're just checking every box. And then the other thing about it is, if you believe that those three on their own are going to command at least the attention of four players, because there's going to have to be at least one double team against one of those three guys. That now means your three-technique defensive tackle is probably going to get a one-on-one matchup, which makes things a lot easier for him, whoever it turns out to be, to try to enhance his production and his efficiency. For the moment, let's call the three-technique Mr. X, because we're not sure exactly who that player is going to be. So that's the good news. The other part to this is that if Bowen does decide, and we know he'll blitz some, when he does, boy, think about that now. because if a fifth guy's coming, that's going to force the offense to keep in a tight end, keep in a running back, means fewer targets for the passing game. He could create a lot of issues. And as you know, I'm a huge Isaiah Simmons fan. Yes, he's very good in coverage, but when Isaiah Simmons blitzes, he is extremely effective because of his quickness and his ability to slash through creases to get to the quarterback. So I think this is a really good mix for what Bowen wants to do. And I don't think that Bowen had enough tools to do what he wanted to do unless they got that second part of the dynamic duo. And the Giants simply could not trust Ojulari to be that guy based on his tenure so far in the NFL. That's why they made the significant trade to go get Brian Burns.
Simply put, how big of a loss is Xavier McKinney?
I'm not sure. I'm really not. He did not play well the first half of last year and really turned it on the second half of the season and played like a Pro Bowl caliber player should. But you don't go to the Pro Bowl by playing great in half a year. And that's what I saw in Xavier McKinney. I saw a terrific second half, but I did not see that player in the first half of the season. So how big of a loss is that? Don't know. How well will either Belton step up? He's looked good in flashes, but he's never had to be a full-time starter. We all know this. When he's played, he's been around the ball. So I think there's a lot of projection for Dane Belton. We don't know, but there's a lot of projection there. Same thing with Tyler Nubin. Now, that's a little bit of a different story because he's never played in the NFL before. But there's nothing but rave reviews for him coming out of Minnesota. A lot of people thought he was the best safety in this draft. He's certainly incredibly smart. He's very instinctive, and he hits. So, I don't know. I'll tell you this. I mentioned Big Blue Kickoff Live earlier today. You want a bold prediction? Everybody's going to think that of the Giants rookie class this year, that Malik Neighbors will have the most snaps of any of the rookies. I think that's a pretty safe thing to say. But if you want a bold prediction, how about I tell you that Nubin has more snaps than Neighbors does this year, especially if he winds up winning the starting job in week 1.
Feasible. It's certainly feasible. I mean, I would think that safety position is up for grabs between Belton and Nubin. You would think that Nubin would be the favorite, but I would also think they're going to let Belton compete for that spot.
Yeah, but why wouldn't you?
Right.
Let them fight it out. Competition, supposedly breeds out the best in everybody. So let them fight it out and see who gets it. And if they wind up playing a lot of 3 safeties, fine.
Let's talk about the linebackers. Last year, Bobby Okereke, I thought he should have been a Pro Bowler. I mean, obviously, I guess you have to have fancier stats than what he had.
He played at that level, Patty, and he was amongst the tackle leaders in the NFL all season long.
Absolutely. And next to him, he had, Micah McFadden, who, didn't play badly. I think, the missed tackles were really a kind of a little bit of a stain on his game. But, you look at that unit, as led by Okereke, how is their role going to change in this defense, if at all? And just, are they pretty much set there, or do you think they might look to upgrade maybe that McFadden spot?
That's a really good question because we really haven't had much of a chance to sit down with Shane Bowen to dissect everything that he wants to do. So I think there's still a great unknown in a lot of areas with this defense. I will say this. We know what Okereke is. Pencil him in for another 150 tackles. He's durable. He's smart. He's a really good leader. He's just a really, really good player. And their best all-around middle linebacker since Antonio Pierce. So he's solid. McFadden, he's athletic. Yes, he did miss some tackles. Yes, he took some bad angles. But he was still productive in his own way. I'd like to believe that Beavers is going to be able to inject himself somewhere into this equation. And that at some point in time, not only does he make the 53 coming out of camp, but I want to believe that Beavers may actually find a role on this team. Potentially, let's just say if it's short yardage or even goal line, where he might go in for McFadden because of his beef. You know, he hits like a truck. We know what he was when he came out of Cincinnati, had a terrific rookie training camp his first summer, and then shredded his knee. Last year, he was on practice squad. I just don't think his knee was right, and he was able to actually perform up to the level that he needed to become, part of the equation. Well, now he's got a new lease on life. We've seen him during the spring workouts, and he's out there with everybody else battling and competing for a job. I'm not going to forget about Beavers. I'm not. I continue to have him in the back of my mind. I keep thinking I saw too much out of him as a rookie when he was really good when he first came in. Again, the preseason and training camp, he was dynamite. I want to say he might have a role on this team, and it might be a little bit more significant than people think.
It's possible. I mean, there's going to be competition. I think, other than Okereke, who you could say is pretty much a lock, I don't know that you can say, Dexter's a lock, obviously. I think Banks is a lock. But you're going to have competition, across the board,
Well, you'll see a lot of Simmons. You know that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're going to see a lot of McFadden. But
Sure.
Again, how much of him will you see, or how much of Simmons will you see? Or will Beavers, again, get to be part of that equation? And then how much of him will you see?
Right.
And how much will you see of Ojulari? My anticipation is that maybe Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns play, 80% of the snaps apiece? That's going to leave, some room there for Ojulari to play too. Now, as long as in that maybe reduced role, he's able to stay healthy and gets his efficiency up again, all of a sudden the Giants have a lot of really good guys in that front seven.
Yeah, for sure. Paul, let's talk about special teams. And I think the big thing on everybody's mind is this new kickoff rule, this new formation, and how that might change things, how, special teams coordinators approach scheming for this. Let me start off by getting your thoughts on the rule change.
Oh, boy, there are so many subdivisions and appendixes to the rules. I think there's going to be a lot of confusion early in the year. I know the officials have been studying it 24/7 so that they can legislate it correctly. I hope they do, because it's going to be very hard to do so. I hope the players and the coaches are able to understand it correctly so that they're able to effectively execute the plays within the scope of the rules. In terms of what do I think the impact is on the game, I love the fact that the kickoff is still here. I don't want to just line the ball up at the 20 or the 25 or the 30-yard line or the 35-yard line. I'd like the kickoff to stay in the game. And if this is a one-year experiment that will increase safety, which is always a good thing, and still allow the kickoff to stay in the game, well, then I'm for it. I do know this. When they used it in the XFL, I thought it was kind of odd at first. It took me a couple of games to kind of like, all right, I guess this is pretty good. Yeah, all right. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, okay. I didn't fall in love with it, but I started to digest it a little bit. So my thought is, yeah, I'm good with giving it a try. And I do believe, like we all do, Patty, that, you're probably better off with a running back there returning the kicks than you are a wide receiver or a defensive back. I do think a running back, because running backs need vision more so than your receivers do. They also need that one-cut ability to make those quick decisions and slice, and also to hit the hole hard. They're used to operating in smaller space. The good news is your kickoff returners no longer have to worry about trying to field the ball while someone is coming down crashing on them, because again, the kick coverage team can't take off until the ball's caught or the ball's touched. So you shouldn't have a lot of ball security issues either. So that's kind of a good thing, I think. I think ultimately it could be a really exciting play. So I'm intrigued.
What about coverage, though? I mean, now your kicker becomes part of the coverage. You've got Graham Gano, who's 37 years old, coming off knee surgery. What do you do there?
Give Matt Barr a call. He loved to tackle people.
I think he's a little past his prime, though. But seriously, no, it's a legitimate question, because I forget who the team was, but wasn't there some team who said they were thinking about taking their kicker off?
Yeah,
Chiefs.
I don't recall which one it was either, Patty. But during the spring drills, there was a team that was giving a non-kicker an opportunity to practice kickoffs. That is true, and even the Giants with Coach Gabriel, who is now the special teams coordinator coming over from his time with the Jets. Even he said he would consider it, because there are some players potentially who will be on the 53 that are not kickers that he would consider potentially doing that with. I don't know. I think teams are going to feel their way through the forest. And if you find out that there are too many returns that are coming back, and you find out that some of these kickers are getting hurt, well, then you're going to see some teams try to do something about it. I mean, isn't that the way it usually works? You try something, and when you find out if it's not working real well, then you tweak it. I mean, I think that's what we're going to be faced with. I'll say this, from a return perspective, and I know Coach Gabriel mentioned this the other day, you may see two kickoff returners back there instead of just one, and that goes back to years ago. Years ago, back in the 70s, it was not unusual to see two kickoff returners back there for waiting for the kickoff. And then, over the years, we got to seeing one guy's a little deeper than the other. Sometimes it was just one entirely, and that was it. And then on certain cases in recent years, teams would put two back there. But no, I think you'll see two kickoff returners a lot with the new rules.
Yeah, I think so too. It's going to be interesting. I can't wait to see how it kind of plays out, because, again, you have a lot of kickers that are up there in age, and you probably don't want them chasing down returners and having to make tackles and stuff like that, because it's just not in your best interest. You don't want to lose a Graham Gano again.
No, I totally understand that. Yeah. Again, I think some teams will have to get burned by, returns and or injuries before they start replacing a kicker out of that lineup.
Yeah. All right, Paul, final question for you. We know progress is never linear for a football team, or any sports team for that matter. That being said, by the end of the year, how will we know? What do we need to look for to say that this Giants team has made progress as a team?
Oh, your eyes will tell you. The tape doesn't lie. It never has, and it never will. I mean, that's just the facts. You'll watch this team, and you'll have an understanding: is this team on the right track? Are they better? Are they moving the ball more efficiently? How are they doing in the red zone? How are they doing on third down? Are they getting sufficient pressure on the quarterback? In spots when they need to run the ball, can they run the ball? Can they execute a 4-minute offense? I mean, these are all standard chapters in football 101. And all you need to do is put a little box next to each one of those things and just say, okay, check, 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 check. If you got a lot of checks at the end of the season, the Giants are moving in the right direction. If you have a lot of empty boxes at the end of the season, then you know things aren't going well.
What do you think the record will be? If you had to take a guess, how many wins?
Too early, Patty. I never give a record prediction anywhere until I see the final preseason game. And sometimes I even wait now until I see the 53-man roster, because we've seen years where 5 or 6 guys could change, and it does make a difference. Yeah, so, no. What do I think the record will be? I don't know. I certainly believe that the Giants have the ability, if a lot of those projections, most of them, not every one, but if most of the projections wind up giving them what they need, there's no reason why the Giants can't be in a wild card race in December going into, the new year. That could happen, but they're going to need most of those projections to come to fruition, which means not only do the rookies have to give them something, because they've got a couple of very important ones, certainly up top in Nubin and Neighbors, and Theo Johnson could also be considered a real important one as well. But not only do they need those rookies to contribute something significant pretty quickly, they're also going to need their second and third year players to play like they really belong and can become solid players, not just guys who are showing flashes, not just guys who are part of a rotation. They got to become concrete, solid, good players for this team, to try to make something out of itself by the end of the season.
Absolutely. And I don't know about you, but I'm optimistic. Let's just
I'm intrigued, Patty. I'm intrigued,
optimistic. Let's just hope we don't get our hearts broken again.
I think as long as the team has a reasonable amount of health, I think there are enough of quality projections that you're going to have a really competitive team here this year. That's what I think. That's my best prediction right now.
Sounds good to me. I mean, let's hope some of these projections work out, because it's been a long time. All right, folks. He is Paul Dottino, member of the Giants WFAN radio network, member of the New York Giants broadcast team. I want to thank him for coming on. The hour just went by so fast, Paul. It always does, right? It didn't seem like it was an hour. We could probably go another hour or two. And
Absolutely.
Except some of us have to go when I have to do the other stuff, But anyway, it was great having you on, my friend. I appreciate you. Giant fans, I appreciate you guys tuning in, spending your time with us here. Hope you enjoyed the program. Keep it here all week long on the Locked On Giants podcast. Don't forget, I start my opponent previews tomorrow. We're going to have David Harrison of Locked On Commanders. He's up first, and he had some really interesting things to say about how the Commanders match up with the New York Giants as of right now, what to expect and whatnot. So that'll be on tomorrow's show, and we'll just keep on bringing those to you. For Paul Dottino, I'm Patricia Traina. Giant fans, we will see you tomorrow.